Hey, everybody, this is Kyle Jetzel, the Driven Autism Dad, and I want to thank you for joining me for this, our story. Today, what I want to do is share the story of our struggle, of how we were struggling as an autism family and didn't really know what to do to one of the happiest families you'll ever find, and how we made that transition as we raised our kids on the spectrum very quickly, as a matter of fact. uh, and kind of the framework we used and the process we used to do that. So my goal, I just want to tell you what my goal for this uh, story is to give you some details that really made a difference for us, and I think will make a difference for you. And if you're and maybe at the very bottom when you're done with this, you can get a free guide. It's a copy of my new book I've just written. So what I want to do is start out by telling you a little bit about my family. My name's Kyle Jetzel, like I said, and I have 6 kids, uh, 5 sons and 1 daughter. My 2 middle sons are on the autism spectrum. One is more severe. One is kind of level 2, if you know what that means. Um, one is level 3, obviously more severe. And we have a pretty happy family. As a matter of fact, my oldest son, not this weekend, but next weekend, he's 27 years old. He's married and out of the house. And he's actually um, invited all my kids. He's rented a van and he's invited all my kids to take a weekend trip with him and leave me here. So I'm all by myself. So I'm all excited about that. And the reality is that's kind of uh, describes how our family feels about each other, right? Even as we've faced autism and the struggles and trials that we faced, we've developed what is one top 1% happy family. Um, all my kids want to be here. My typical kids feel loved and cared for. They're they're doing great in this world. Even my kids on the spectrum are. And my youngest 2 are twins, a boy and a girl, and they're now 14 years old. So a lot of the things that you're experiencing, the biting, scratching, kicking, hitting, poop smearing, defiance, you name it, we've gone through it, especially with 2 kids on the spectrum at different levels. So, like I said, and I'll share with you a little bit about my wife here in a minute. Up until she passed away about 15 months ago, we had what I would consider to be a top 1% happy marriage, and she would nod her head when I said that. So that means she considered that to be true too. But I just want to tell you, it wasn't always that way for our family. There was a time when we were in real trouble as a family. Um, as Eric was growing up, we knew something was different about him. But Eric is now 22 years old, so this was a long time ago. And back then, autism wasn't really what like it is now. Back then, when you thought of autism, you thought of a kid sitting in a wheelchair stimming. That's pretty much all autism was to most of us. Obviously, now there's been so much more information out there about it. There's different levels. But back then, we had no idea what was going on. All we knew was that with our first 2 typical boys, all the things we tried were working. I had studied a lot of autism, or a lot of parenting books. I mean, frankly, I couldn't wait to be a dad. I couldn't wait to be a parent. My wife was the same way. We couldn't wait to have kids. We couldn't wait to be parents and raise great kids. And we were excited about that. We planned our whole life for that. But when Eric came along, it was almost like we were asked to take a test for a class we didn't know we were taking. And it was on a course that didn't even exist, that we'd never studied for, right? So when we were first approached by someone who said, "Hey, have you had him checked out to see if he's autistic?" Or back then, that's what they said. I don't know the term now. Or on the autism spectrum, we said, "No." I mean, we had no idea what that was, but ultimately we wanted to get him the help he needed. So, and up until that time, there was some crazy behaviors. There was meltdowns. There was lashing out at people. Like I said, biting, hitting, scratching, pinching, all those things. We just didn't know what was going on. So when he said that, we went and had him checked out, and he was diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And I'll never forget when he was diagnosed. My wife and I looked at each other and we were relieved, because now we thought he was going to get the help he needed, and we were going to get the help we needed as a family to start getting back to normal, right? And I say that with a smile on my face, because already getting back to normal is not normal, right? That's a little bit of a misnomer there, uh, but it really didn't work that way, right? I mean, we tried ABA, we tried all these different therapies. My wife and I went to therapies because it was the stress and strain that was put on our home was tremendous. And thinking that getting the diagnosis was the answer was just not the answer. We were still struggling with meltdowns. We found ourselves kind of on this autism roller coaster. And tell me if this sounds familiar to you. So, there were super duper highs and super duper lows. I'll never forget when, my wife was gone the whole day and I had him, Eric, with me, and I was working with him all day. And he's pretty nonverbal, was nonverbal at the time. He speaks a little bit now. But I remember I sat in front of him and just said, "I love you, Mom. I love you, Mom." Right? And just kept saying it over and over and over. And he was probably 5. And I finally got him to say it. And when Shelly, my wife, got home, I said, "Check this out." And I kind of prompted him and he said, "I love you, Mom." And we, both of us, almost lost it. We cried. We were so happy. And it was this extremely high, right? It was so exciting for us. The simple things were so exciting for us. Well, less than a week later, um, he got angry and found a knife in the kitchen and tried to stab both of us in a fit of rage over a puzzle piece he couldn't find. So the highs were high, but the lows were pretty dang low. And over the time we finally got him potty trained after we developed a strategy, but we finally got him potty trained. He was 9 years old, and I'll never forget. We finally got him potty trained. My wife and I almost cried because we had newborn twins, and my older son and my younger son, who was 7 at the time, were all in diapers. So 4 kids in diapers. It was horrible. I was changing diapers on a 9-year-old, and it was so exciting. We were so excited that we finally got him potty trained, and within days, my second one was potty trained at 7 years old. And the high that brought was tremendous. And less a couple of days later, 2 days later, as a matter of fact, he something happened. He was tipped into a meltdown and he smashed his head through a plate glass window. And I'll never forget sitting in the emergency room holding him. Try holding a kid that doesn't want to be held for stitches. I was sitting there just, that high was gone, never to return. Right? I mean, it was so discouraging. And it seemed like what was happening is the highs weren't matching the lows. The lows were so low that our baseline kept getting lower and lower. We'd experience a high, but it wouldn't get us back up to level. And so we were on this autism roller coaster, and it was just a struggle in our home. We couldn't go anywhere. We got to where people weren't inviting us to do things anymore because of meltdowns, or, we started to become isolated. We started losing friends. We couldn't really go out. We couldn't get a babysitter. I mean, we didn't get a babysitter for years because he was just unmanageable. And so we were really, really struggling as a family. The isolation, the feeling like we were horrible parents. No matter what we tried, we just couldn't seem to help him. And it was really tearing us down. And it was causing strain between my wife and I. It was causing strain on my 2 typical older sons. The stress in our home was overwhelming. It's been said, and I've heard this, that the stress in an autism home can match that of a combat soldier. And I promise you that is how we felt early on. And I remember our tipping point was one Saturday morning at about 6:30 a.m. The whole house was awakened by my son screaming. His name is Eric. Like this blood curdling scream, right? I mean, just this, like we thought somebody was dying, and we couldn't figure out what was going on. We couldn't figure out why he was screaming. And he woke up the whole house. My wife and I, my 2 older typical sons. It was like a time bomb had hit the house, and it was being flooded, and a hurricane or a tornado all at the same time. And typically a meltdown could last between 15 and maybe 45 minutes at the most. Well, this was a 4-hour meltdown. And every time we would think we were getting him calmed back down, he would ramp back up and the stress would go out the roof. And he ended up throwing a brick through one window, attacking one of my other older sons, my typical sons. And they ended up hiding in their room and locking the door to kind of avoid everything. And finally, when we finally got him calmed down, I'll never forget. It was almost like, um, the stress was so tremendous. I think sometimes when things are that bad, you want to blame somebody. And it turns out my wife and I kind of started blaming each other, right? And she started saying things like, if you would have just done this, if you'd have just loved on him a little bit more, calmed down, then he would have calmed down. And so I turned on her, well, if you'd give him a little discipline in his life, then maybe you wouldn't, and it turned into this argument, and we were just hurtling insults at each other. And my wife was a very feminine, beautiful lady, and it's not like her to argue and fight, but this was a fight that was a long time coming, and she was upset with me. And she had lost all, really, she had just kind of, we were at odds. Our relationship was damaged because of the stress. Like I said, my two older sons were in their room hiding. They were scared about what was going to happen. And I'll never forget, after this argument went on and on, I thought, you know what, it's not getting into this anywhere. So I grabbed my keys and I went out on the front porch, and I thought, this isn't what I signed up for. And I'm just standing there furious, over the whole situation. This is not what I signed up for. This is not the kind of family I'd imagined. This isn't what I dreamed about. I can't take this anymore. And I remember standing there with my keys in my pocket, just ready to get in my car and leave. And I was done. And I think my wife was too. Just done with it all. It's over. You know what? I got to start over. And I'm standing there with my keys in my pocket, and I had a memory pop into my mind of my father, a lesson he had taught me when I was like 11 or 12 years old. And I was playing in not a high school, just a baseball game, just a little league baseball game. And there was 2 outs in the last inning, and I was playing shortstop, and the ball was hit to me. And if I had just caught the ball and threw the guy out, the game would have been over and we would have won. We were ahead, but I didn't. I fumbled the ball and made an error. And the next kid got a hit, and the next kid, and they ended up winning the game. And after the game, I was just distraught. And I went over to my dad and I said, you know what, Dad, I wish the ball hadn't been hit to me, because then we could have won the game. And I'll never forget my dad, as kindly as he could, and with as much compassion as he could, kind of got down on my level. And he said, you know what, Kyle, that's not the way we do things. You don't ever want to be your success to be in someone else's hands. He says, you want every ball, every game hit to you. You want to be the reason you win or you lose. He says, you're not always going to win. Don't you ever go down trying to pass the buck, or don't you ever go down without the biggest fight you can possibly put up. And, as I thought about that, standing on that porch, I thought, you know what? I can't leave. I'm not supposed to leave. This is my family. I got to figure this crap out. But we just can't live like this anymore. This is just, there's too much stress. It's too strenuous. It's tearing our family apart. And so I did something else that my father had taught me. And at the time, we were living in a little town called Rocket, Texas, just outside of Dallas. And we had a big giant pecan tree in the front yard. And so I walked over under that pecan tree, and I just fell to my knees in prayer and just started praying and just asking for help. I didn't know what to do. I mean, we tried everything, the experts and the therapies and the ABA and all these things. We tried everything the experts had told us to do. And I remember just feeling like God was on my side and that I can fix this. And it's my responsibility to fix this, not fix my son, but fix the situation. And so, I remember going back inside, and my wife was in there waiting, still pretty angry. And I said, you know what? I'm not going anywhere, and I'm going to fix this. And she was still pretty mad at me. And she said, well, good luck, is what she said. I'll never forget that. Right. But it set me on a path to figure this crap out. Right. Nobody needs to live in that overwhelming stress all the time. And we just couldn't do it. And so, about that time, I remember I started finding every article I could find and researching and reading every book I could find. And I went back and read, typical parenting books, and I found autism books, and there just was no guide for the very specific things we were facing. And about that time, I came across an article, an ESPN article about a guy called Alex Honnold. And he's a free solo climber, which means he climbs mountains with no ropes. And, it was fascinating. This guy's up on the side of a sheer cliff, he's climbing 1,000-foot cliffs with no ropes. I mean, if he makes one mistake, he dies. And so as I read about him, I was really curious to see kind of what his process was. And he said, it was pretty simple. He says, um, there was 3 things he did. He said, I'm not the greatest climber in the world. I don't have the strongest hands. I'm not the best climber. He says, but there's a couple things I do that do really well. And the 3 things he said were, he said, get trained, number 1. Number 2, make one good decision. He said he didn't look up 100 feet ahead of him, right? And look, he just looked one move at a time, one good decision. And he just stacks those, and he never looks too far ahead, right? One good decision. Get trained, one good decision, and don't freak out, right? And this really resonated with me because we were freaking out. When my son would freak out, we would freak out. And I thought, you know what? That's cool. Get trained, make one good decision, and don't freak out, right? And so I started to think, maybe I can create my own strategies. Maybe I can create my own training just for myself. And so I started doing that. And I kind of thought of it about it like this. And this is a framework I want you to write down if you're taking notes. What is the problem we're having, right? What is the solution? What do we really want? What's the problem we're having right now? What do we really want? And then I needed to create a strategy and tactics that I could do that I thought would get me there. Right now, what would typically happen is I would create a strategy and some tactics, and sometimes those tactics wouldn't necessarily get me there. So I'd have to adjust those tactics as I went. But what started to happen is I started to create these strategies, right? And adjust my tactics. And I started to see a little bit of success, right? And I'm going to share one with you right now to give you an example, okay? And let me tell you what the problem was. And I'm going to go through this framework. So the problem was my son Eric's meltdowns were ruining everything for us. It felt like, and again, I know they don't have to ruin everything, but if you had a meltdown early in the morning, it ruined our whole day. And we didn't want to go anywhere because we were afraid he'd have a meltdown in Walmart or Target or the park. So we would not go places. And when people would see it and see us struggle, they would kind of quit inviting us, right? And so it created this isolation. So meltdowns were a huge thing in our family, right? And so I created a strategy, and I called it Winning Every Meltdown. And I want to share that one with you right now, because what it did for us is it changed all that, right? Once I learned the strategy and the tactics to winning every meltdown, we could face a meltdown with courage, right? And we no longer walked around on eggshells trying not to make him melt down. If he melted down, and we managed it. And then when it was done, we went back to being a happy family. And so it entirely changed the dynamics of our family, just knowing this one strategy. So I'm going to share that with you. And it's called, and I have it written down, but I'll share that with you a little bit later, but I know this strategy, okay? And it's called Winning Every Meltdown. I'm just going to set it above me here. And the key to this is this. You've got to be at your best when they're at their worst, right? And so we have to do what's best for them in those situations. So sometimes meltdowns will happen. It's inevitable, right? That's who these kids are. And they can kind of grow out of it and learn things, but we really got to address these things properly. So I'm going to teach you today a little acronym called APWEC. That's APWEC. So APWEC stands for this. A is assume. Assume there will be meltdowns. I'm always shocked when parents come to me and they seem surprised by a meltdown, right? That's what some of our kids do. That's who they are right now. And so why are we surprised when they have meltdowns? So we shouldn't be surprised by meltdowns. We should understand up front that they are going to have them. And let's not set ourselves up for failure from the very beginning, right? So the A is assume they'll have meltdowns. The P is prepare yourself, right? So when I was growing up, I played a lot of sports. And one of the things I was taught is to put yourself in a physical and mental state for success, right? So as you got ready to face an opponent in something, you'd stand up tall, you'd feel the power that you have in your body, right? And you start thinking about winning, right? And so prepare yourself in a better physical and mental state. You got to use your body. You got to stand up straight. When a meltdown happens, we should assume they will. A, prepare yourself mentally and physically, right? So you stand up straight. You say, I'm prepared for this. I can win this meltdown, and I'm going to take care of it in the proper way. I'm going to show love and kindness, right? So the W is win, determined to win. Now, what I don't mean by win is get them to stop quickly or any of that stuff. What I do mean by win is being at your best during this meltdown, being at your most productive. And you win by staying calm, cool, and collected. You win by expressing love. Even when it gets real hard, you win by being there for your son, right? And you win through kindness and patience and love, right? So A is assume there will be meltdowns. P is prepare yourself mentally and physically. W is win through kindness and love, right? This is a strenuous situation for them. If we flip out, it doesn't help them and it doesn't help us, right? What happens when we flip out is it makes it worse. And then we're frustrated and tired and exhausted, right? So let's not do that. A, assume there will be meltdowns. P, prepare yourself mentally and physically. W, win through kindness and love. The E in APWEC is endure and energy. This is really important, right? So, whether it's a 5-minute meltdown or an hour-long meltdown, we need to be patient and kind throughout that process, endure that process, and stay in that positive state of kindness and love, right? That's what they need from us. I will tell you this, when you're in that state and when you're kind and loving, they calm down a lot quicker, right? So there's a benefit to both of you in that situation. But E, the energy is interesting, right? And I'll never forget, we all have this reserve energy. I think we like to think we're so exhausted we can't do anything else, right? But I'll never forget watching professional athletes, in a 7-game NBA series, when the series is over, they're exhausted, right? They can barely walk. But as soon as they win, right, they run up in the stands, they hug their family, they hug their fans, they run around on the field, then they go party all night long. They have this reserve energy, and we all have that, right? And so after a meltdown, when a meltdown is over and your child is back to normal, you need to stand up tall and have that energy and not let it exhaust you, because it can if you let it. Rely on that reserve energy, right? So A is assume, P is prepare physically and mentally, W is win through kindness and love, E is endure with happiness and energy, and then C is to celebrate. And I think this is one of the most important things we can do. When we were little, we were so excited if we got gummy worms, right? Or a candy bar. We would flip out, right? And we don't, as adults, we don't tend to celebrate things like we should, I think. And so one of the things that we need to do when we're done with the meltdown and we've managed it properly and we've gone through it with kindness and love and we've endured and we have energy, is we need to celebrate our success, right? And you walk out of that room where that kid is at, and whatever it is you need to do, I'm like, yes, right? I'm excited that I managed that meltdown in a way that allows me to win it, right? And give my son what he needs during that meltdown. Now, I'll never forget, this is funny, I'll never forget one day, and by the way, this was just me initially. I just had this for myself. I was doing it consistently. One day, I was up, my son had a meltdown. It was a Saturday and it was about, I don't know, 1 o'clock or so. We were about to go somewhere. And my wife says, my son starts to scream up in his room and smash things. And so I run up there. I said, I got this, babe. And I went up there and I apwhacked him, right? Assumed there would be meltdowns, prepared, win through kindness and love, and had energy and endured, and then celebrated. And I came back down about an hour later and I sat down with the family and I said, all right, I'm ready, let's go. We're all good. And my wife looked at me and she said, Kyle, that's unhealthy. And I said, what's unhealthy? And she said, if you keep suppressing your anger, you're going to explode one day. And that's not going to be a good situation, right? And I said, but I'm not suppressing my anger. I have a system. And she said, what? I said, a system. I have a process. And she said, show me, right? And it was really interesting because she allowed me to show her, and then she started implementing it, right? And my 2 older sons said, we want to see it too, right? And so I showed them and they started doing it, right? And after that, things started to happen in our family, right? We were able to go out again. If he melted down in Target, I took care of it, right? They would watch and they would apwhack. They knew, right? And so if he melted down at the park, we were with friends, they would watch and they would see apwhack. They would see, people would watch and they would be like, wow, that's awesome, right? And it became this way for us to do autism awareness, right? And my wife would say, what's happening is he's managing a meltdown. My son has meltdowns for different reasons. And she would do autism awareness in a great way, right? And so it changed the dynamics of our family. We no longer walked around in eggshells. If he melted down, right? We didn't try to make him melt down, but we weren't so worried about it. It changed the dynamics. And then we started to create strategies for all kinds of different things. This is a book of different strategies, right? We had strategies for potty training. I'll tell you what, My son, I tried everything in the book. I read every book there was on potty training. I probably tried 30 different methods. None of them worked. And then we created a strategy, and within a week he was potty trained, right? And that's one of the strategies in our system. Getting kids to eat, have problems with your kids getting them to eat, strategy. Defiant kids, some of our kids, my son that's level 2, defiant is crap. We had to build a strategy for that, and we did. Gave him more control of his life, but also made him feel like he was getting his way, and it solved that problem forever. Arguing kids that like to argue with you. This is high functioning kids are really good about this, right? Very literal. They'll get you into an argument and it just destroys you, or it causes a lot of problems. Kids pressing your buttons. My son that's level 2, man, he knew how to press buttons. So we created a strategy and solved that problem. And these are super easy to do because we started teaching our older 2 sons when they were young, teenagers, even younger than teenagers. We started teaching them these strategies, right? And they were super easy. And even one that I'll share with you here real quick is one of the problems my wife has is she was really worried about their future. And it was stressing her out bad. And so she knew that that wasn't healthy for her. And she developed a strategy. And it's interesting because that strategy saved her. I remember I came home from work one day and she said, you know what, Kyle, after implementing the strategy, I realized how much damage it was doing for me to be worrying so much, losing sleep. I was constantly worried. I was, I'd wake up in the middle of the night worried who's going to take care of them, who would love them like us. Are they being taken care of at school? And she said, it's damaging me. And she said to me, I used to think that how much I love them should match the amount of worry that I have in my life. And she said, it seemed like it was right. And she said, after I quit worrying and I developed a strategy, I quit worrying so much. She said, I kind of felt guilty because I wasn't worried so much about him. And she said, I realized what was happening. And she created a strategy for guilt, right? Because she shouldn't feel guilty for not worrying. Of course, we're going to do what we need to do, but just the worry alone is not effective. It's not. And it's interesting because this strategy that she created, she had a name for it. I won't tell you what it is. It's pretty interesting though. About 6 months after our 30th anniversary, my wife and I's 30th anniversary, she got really sick. And within 10 days, she passed away. Now, you got to understand, this is the love of my life. We had a top 1% happy marriage. And these kind of things can destroy families. It could have destroyed me. This is a problem, right? I knew what I wanted. I wanted to be a happy, great father, continue to raise my kids, but I was in turmoil. So I needed a strategy. Here's what's interesting. The strategy that she created for worry was I grabbed it and stuck it all over my house. As a matter of fact, you can see it over my shoulder. See that little white thing there? I'll grab it. This is the strategy that saved me. This is the strategy that my wife put together for worry that saved me and has allowed me to continue to be a good father. And it's really been the only way I could have possibly survived that strategy. How cool is that, right? Problem, what do you want? Strategy and tactics. Can you see that there's tactics on there? And you know what? I got it all over the house. It's in my bedroom. It's in my bathroom. It's hanging on this so the kids can see it. They use it too to manage the grief and the pain and suffering that we've had in our family since my wife passed away. So, strategies are very important, but we still faced a problem. And that was this. When things got real dicey, right? It's great to know what to do and have a strategy, but it's hard to do it when things go really wrong, right? And so one of the things we struggled with was, how do we do it when the crap hits the fan, right? And this is where Alex Honnold's system was really cool. We were getting trained and we had tactics that were working, so we were making good decisions. But, he says, don't freak out. That was our problem, right? I would go into fight because that's how I grew up. My 2 older sons would go into flight because they just wanted to get away and hide. And my wife would go into freeze. It would scare her, right? So fight, flight, or freeze is who we were. And we knew that when things got dicey, we had to be really good at these strategies, right? So we decided that became a strategy. Here was our problem. We couldn't be who we needed to be when it got really scary or really freaky or crazy stuff started to happen. Shoot. Now I've got the sniffles. And so, that was our problem. So we thought it was kind of cool at that point because I thought, how can we snap ourselves into how can we trigger ourselves into the highest predictive state possible, right? And so I remembered that the answer to that was I remembered something that happened to me a few years back. So when I was younger, in one of my first jobs, I had a boss that was a pretty smart dude. Obviously, a lot of bosses are pretty smart. Some aren't, but this one was. And we had a specific client that he had me working with. It was very difficult. And so I'll never forget, I got a message from one of our clients and I went in to talk to him about how to handle it. And I said, how do you want me to handle this, guys? His name was Frank. I said, how do you want me to handle Frank? He's tricky. I'm not sure, I want some guidance on this one. He said, well, do this. And I said, well, I don't think that's going to work because, Frank he's a mess, man. He's tricky. Here's what he's going to do. He's going to come back with this and this and this and this. And he said, well, that's a pessimistic attitude. That's what he told me. And I didn't like that. I said, you know what? I'm not a pessimist. I'm a realist. I know who he is and what he does, right? And he says, well, that's what pessimists call themselves. They call themselves realists. So, right. And he was smart. He had some skins on the wall. So I'm like, crap. I didn't like that, so I'm the kind of guy that I like to solve problems for myself, right? So I went out and got a book called How to Be an Optimist, right? And I read it in about a week. And I thought, all right, I got it. Here we go. Well, a couple of weeks later, I'm back in his office. Frank had another issue. And I go in and I say, hey, here's the issue. And he tells me, and I say, well, Frank's going to blah, blah, blah. And he goes, there you go, being a pessimist again. And I was really mad this time because I thought I read the book. I know it. Why am I not doing it? Right? So what I decided to do was take that book, and there was 10 lessons in this book. And I broke down the first lesson and I created a worksheet. And I thought, I'm going to focus on this one lesson this week. And I'm going to focus on it all week. Right? And so I created a worksheet and I wrote it out and I stuck it somewhere I could see it when I woke up. And I stuck it on my desk at the office. And I focused on that the whole week. Right? And then week 2, I wrote up lesson number 2 on a worksheet and, documented some things I was going to do and some tactics, right? Remember, strategy, tactics, right? And about 4 weeks into it, week 3, I did week 3. Week 4, I did week 4. And after about 4 weeks, I remember going in my boss's office and he says, you're different, man. What's going on? And what had happened is not only was I learning strategies and tactics, but I was internalizing them, right? And a big part of that for me was creating worksheets and filling those out. Now, you probably saw this, right? That's my winning every meltdown worksheet, right? APWEC, you know the strategy, right? And so this became something we did as a family, right? We said, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to focus on winning every meltdown, and we're going to write up a worksheet, right? And we're going to all focus on it together. And my wife was engaged now because she had seen a couple of my strategies work. And then we even created a strategy on how to snap yourself into the most productive state when things go horribly wrong, right? And that became the very first strategy we teach in our program. But, again, if you recall, there's worksheets and strategies and tactics for potty training, getting kids to eat, defiant kids, arguing kids, kids that press your buttons, worry. Those of you parents that worry about their future and find yourself losing sleep or those kind of things, right? There's strategy and a tactic for that. And it's been tremendous, right? And so the framework for us was very simple, right? Is first of all, what's the problem? What do we want instead, right? And then we create a strategy and tactics that we think will work. And then we make adjustments to those tactics, right? Then what we did is once we kind of dialed it in a little bit and saw a little success, is we would create a worksheet and then make that the focus for the week. So really, that's kind of how we developed our program, and we continue to develop it today. Just recently, I came across an issue with my older son, Eric. He's now 22. I will tell you this too. A lot of these strategies and tactics, because we changed our patterns to their behavior, it helped them change their patterns, number one. Number two, when they freak out and we freak out, that becomes their model, right? And by modeling calmness and kindness and love, it changed that pattern for our kids, right? When things went wrong, we would model kindness and compassion and love. And our kids started to see that, right? Instead of arguing, we managed that in a certain way that was kind and compassionate and loving. There's a couple of key things here that we always did in all of our strategies. That defiant kids, it was done in a loving way, right? There's a strategy, a tactics done in a loving way. And it starts to model those things for our kids on the spectrum. And what ends up happening is they start to pick up those things, and it starts to help them better manage themselves, right? Because we're modeling the kind of behavior that we want them to have when they become adults, right? So recently, Eric started leaving the house. He'd hop on his bike and just go. And I thought he was riding around the neighborhood. Turns out he was riding miles away, right? This is a level 3 son that can't hardly talk. And it was scaring the crap out of me, right? And so, I had to develop a strategy. Here's the problem. He's going places I don't know where he's at, scaring the crap out of me, right? That's the problem. What do I want? I want to know where he's at. I want him to tell me where he's going. And then I want to know how long he's going to be gone, right? We've taught him. So the strategies are pretty simple, right? I've got to come up with a way for him to let me know, number one. Number two, for him to understand time enough for us to work through that. And we created a strategy, and we have tactics. And guess what now? I'll come home and he'll have written me a note where he's going with the time that he's going to be back, right? It's really simple. The framework works, right? The framework works. And for any problem that you've got as a family. Now, here's what's really kind of cool is we got so engrossed. And the reality is it was kind of like my 4 weeks with my boss and becoming an optimist, right? Instead of a pessimist or a realist. Is the more strategies we created and the more we stacked success as a family, the more things we started to see, the stress started to lower, the happiness started to raise. We started to treat all of our family, each other, kinder, more gentle, with more compassion. My wife and I's relationship became repaired. And, I'll just share a quick anecdote with you. I'll never forget, we had solved a lot of the problems, right? We were thriving as a family. Our older boys, our typical kids, were loving their lives. Our sons on the spectrum were really excelling, even though they had issues, and we faced those and created strategies and solved those problems. We were just a happy family. And I'll never forget, after 20 years of being married now, my kids are, still in their early years, and we're still facing a lot of challenges. My wife and I are sitting in bed, and this is about the time we would kind of talk about the kids every night. And, we stayed close. I mean, we wanted to talk about them and see, I would ask her what struggles she's having. She would ask me what struggles, and we would work together to try to figure things out, right? We had a framework. Why not, right? And she leaned over to me, and with tears in her eyes, she said, "You really love me, don't you?" And I thought to myself, how could she ask me that? We've been married 20 years. We've raised all these kids through all the struggles and through the trials. We've worked hard. Of course, I love you. How could you even question that? And she just smiled, and she hugged me, and it was really a sweet moment, but it concerned me. And I spent the next few days thinking about, how could she not know how much I love her? And I don't know, but what I did know is now she knows how much I love her, right? And she passed away knowing how much I love her. And that never ended, right? And even through the stress of raising kids on the spectrum and figuring this stuff out, we created that kind of marriage. People saw it, people knew. I'll share one more story with you about that. At about year 25, we decided to move banks. And if you've ever moved banks, it's a hassle. But our bank was being stupid and we didn't like it. So Shelly and I decided we're going to have the bankers do it, right? They know what they're doing. So we go to a bank, we sit down in front of a banker, this lady, I don't know how old she was, maybe 30 or so. And we were in our 40s at the time, and mid 40s or so. And, she's just transferring all the money and getting it all taken care of. And my wife and I are just chatting and, doing what we do. We're a married couple, just doing what we do. And when we finished up, the lady said to us, she said, "Hey, are you guys newlyweds?" And my wife just started laughing. She said, "No, we've been married 25 years." And the girl said, that's amazing. She said, "The only kind of people that come in here like looking like you do are newlyweds." She said, "I've never met a couple that's been married 25 years that talks to each other and treats each other like you do." And it's because of the framework that we created as a family. And it's because of autism. It's not in spite of autism. It's because we were forced to create a framework and do things that we normally wouldn't have done. Right? So let me go through that framework for you one more time. Okay? You ready? Number one is to figure out the problem, right? What's going on that's causing you stress and strain. Number two is decide what you want, right? Number three is to create a strategy and tactics that you think will get you there and then adjust those. Okay. Once you find that strategy and the tactics that are getting you what you want, then you've got to internalize it, right? You got to create those worksheets, right? You've got to put those things in place that are gonna give you success and teach all your kids, right? A lot of the families that work with us, they have all their kids doing it. Right? And what it does is it creates a world where everybody understands what's going on, right? No reason to hide what you're doing if you're doing it in a spirit of love, right? No reason to hide that. So, last thing I'll share with you is this. We didn't even recognize, I guess, after we started having some success and people started asking us what we were doing, we ended up writing a book. It's on Amazon. It's called Thriving Chaos. You can go get it if you want, but it's not that good. My new book is good, and you can get a copy of my new book below. A free copy, as a matter of fact, a PDF of it if you want. But I remember one day I got home from work, and Shelly, my wife, was sitting in the living room floor crying. She was sitting next to her laptop. And I thought one of the kids had done something right. So I come in and I say, "What happened? I'll take care of it." And I was going to do it in a spirit of love. But it was, when your wife is crying, it can set you off, right? And so she said, "No, it's not that." She said, "I've just read some comments and some people online that are struggling, some moms." And she said, "I know you speak at autism conferences. I know you've written a book." She says, "You have to do more." And I said, "Well, I don't know what to do." And she said, "Well, whatever it is, you need to figure it out," is what she did. So what I want to do now is, now that you know our story and know the frameworks we used, I want to offer you, families work with us in different ways, right? Some people just go to our Autism Thriving Chaos Facebook page and read articles and watch videos. There's over 1,000 videos there. That's fine. Other people want more involvement. Other people want to know our system. They want the workbook. They want it all. It's really up to you. But that's what I just want to know. I just want you to know that I want to make those offers to you, but only if you're interested. So if you are interested in some way, if you just want to watch our videos online and read articles, beautiful. And if that helps, we love that. If you are interested in more, if you want to, the cool part is you can shortcut the process, right? What took us 20 years to create, you can just plug right into, and the strategies work, right? Over and over and over, we've seen, and I've got testimonial after testimonial strategies that have worked. And isn't it great when somebody can just give it to you and you can just implement it, right? We feel like that's great. So if that's what you want, click on the link below, get your free video, or I'm sorry, my new book for free. And once you've done that, it's going to take you to a page where there's another video that I'm going to talk about some of the different ways you can work with us. So if you're interested in that, do it. If not, thanks for watching. I sure appreciate it. Now you know our story. Hopefully that's been helpful. If nothing else, use that framework, right? One more time. What's the problem? What do you want? Create a strategy and tactics, and then adjust those tactics till it gets you what you want for any problem. Then, right, create a worksheet, focus on that for a week, internalize it, share it with your family. Works over and over. If you just want to pop right in and let us help you, we'd love that. We can fast track that for you and get you moving down the right direction. This works for I'm a single dad. It works for single moms, single dads. It works for couples. If your relationship is strained with your spouse, this works for couples because it gets you together on something that works. If you have a great relationship, that's fantastic. If you're early on with kids, we recommend it, because I'll just close with this. This is the last thing I want to tell you is hope is not a strategy. Okay. I come across a lot of families that say, well, if I just love them, that's enough. Well, no, it's not. Hope is not a strategy. Okay. And I can tell you that from experience. I spoke at a conference a few years ago on this subject and some of the things that we were doing. And afterwards, I was at a booth selling my book. I'd written a book and I was selling my book at the booth. And I was talking to parents, and 3 gentlemen came up. They looked a little younger, probably early 20s. And I could tell pretty quickly that the 3 of them were on the autism spectrum, right? And the one, I guess he was the most verbal, came to me, and through difficulty, he expressed to me, he said, I wish my family would have known what you were teaching, because then they would have loved us. And I said, what are you talking about? I'm sure they loved you. Did they tell you they loved you? And he said, yeah, but they didn't love us. That's not how they acted. And so I said, hold on, we need to talk, right? And so we had a discussion, and I'll just give you the short and the tall of it. These 3 young men, because there was so much stress in their home, it caused arguments among their parents. It caused their siblings to want to get away. And they thought it was autism, and they were autism, right? So they felt like, because their parents didn't know how to manage the stress, and it was just so stressful, that they were the reason for the pain and suffering in their family, and why it had been damaged, and people weren't getting along, and mom and dad divorced, or in some cases, and in other cases, they thought they were the reason. And it broke my heart, right? And one of the kids even said, I just wish I had been born. Then that they could have been happy. And it shook me, right? And that is the last thing we want to do, right? Do not leave it to chance. This is way too important. Our kids' happiness, our family's happiness is way too important for us to just hope, right? Use this framework I've taught you today. I hope you took notes. If not, go back and watch the video again. Take notes. Write the framework down, okay? Write down winning every meltdown, the strategy we use. Start using that and getting success. I want for you, now that my wife is gone, I got to have something to focus my attention on, because I realized when she passed away that 99% of my attention was focused on her. And now I'm focusing it on helping families, and I want you to have success. So if you're interested in working with us directly, click on the link below, grab a copy of the free book, and watch the next video. If not, use this formula starting today. Use that strategy I gave you. I'm hoping for success for you. I can't wait to see you on the other side if it's something you think you want to do. If not, please don't leave it to chance. Don't leave the success or failure of your family to chance. Do what my dad said, right? Don't you go down without the biggest fight you can give. And hope is not enough. Okay? Use the formula I've given you. Make it work for you. And I can't wait to hear your success. Share with me your success. Whether you use something I have or not, share with me your success, and I can't wait to hear it. I'll talk to you next time. This has been Kyle Jetso. I'm the Driven Autism Dad. If you like the video, share it with somebody. Tell them to go here and watch it. I'd love for as many people as possible to see this and to help as many people as we possibly can. Thanks a lot. We'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.